Hi, this is Rick from Dr. B's Guitars. Glad everybody could join me here today. Thanks for watching. I got some interesting info for you today. This is a discussion about some of the basics of therapeutic guitar construction, and I'll talk a lot about different body limitations that you might have from injury, and then how the guitar construction can affect those. So it's a pretty complex process. I'll try to address one thing at a time. I am a registered nurse. I've been a nurse for over 47 years. As such, I've always been interested in music, but I've also always been interested in physiology, how the body works. And then over time, I got more interested in how to construct guitars so that they can help people who have injuries or just pain from repetitive motion from playing for years and years. And I've talked with some orthopedic surgeons, occupational therapists, to try to get some better ideas about the construction, and I'll illustrate that as I go through some of the different things that can happen due to injuries and so forth. When you're playing guitar, obviously your two hands have very different functions, grabbing frets and so forth. The other hand is either finger picking, operating a pick, strumming, and that sort of thing. And so the kinds of injuries that you can have can vary from side to side. Obviously, you're not going to have so much dexterity issues with your strumming hand as you are with your fretting hand. You're not going to have as much shoulder problem with your fretting hand as you are your strumming hand. It just is a matter of use, both with guitar and whatever your job is. Physical jobs, repetitive jobs like working on a keyboard, that sort of thing, can all affect how you get repetitive motion injuries. It's a cumulative thing. That stuff adds up over time. Eventually, you get to a point where it starts to stack up on you, and that's what has happened to me. When I was younger, I'd get injured, a week at the most, maybe sometimes a couple days. I was right back where I needed to be, and so forth. As I've aged, it's taken longer to do that. And now I'm at a point in my life where when I get injured, it never heals completely again. I have a finger that everybody in the family jokes about because when I'm pointing at somebody, I kind of have to correct if I'm going to point actually at them. That's all it does. And I'm fortunate to have that. It was cut almost off. I was working in the garage and had some lights laying on the floor. The ladder slipped. I fell face first down, landed on a light escutcheon, and that finger took the brunt of the whole fall. And so it was a quick trip to the hospital, holding a rag on my finger with my buddy frantically driving 40 minutes to the hospital. And obviously something I don't want to do again. It was no fun. Fingers hurt. It was in a contraption for quite a while to try and save as much of the tendon function as we could. I'm fortunate to have what I have there. Normally when a finger is cut that badly here, they just remove it from here out. The doc I worked with was an amazing guy, and he decided to try and save it, and I've got actually pretty good function. I don't play with a pick, so I finger pick everything I'm going to play, and it still works for the kind of stuff I do. I may not be that fast, but it'll do what I need it to do. I'm a guy who likes symmetry, and I had wrecked a finger on my right hand, and so I thought it was only fair to do something on the left side to correspond to that. And so when I was 51 years old, I crashed on a skateboard and broke this wrist, and so it doesn't have the motion that the other side does. That's all it'll do on its own. I've had some injuries that have helped me have some better perspective on designs that might help people. I've worked with a few people who have some kind of unique injuries. I'll go injury by injury here because it's a really complex process, but you'll be able to see some of why guitars are constructed the way they are. Number one is probably wrist flexion and extension. Obviously, this side doesn't go quite like this side. As you play the guitar, when your hand is out toward the headstock, your hand is in more of a fingers pointing in that direction position. As you move in here, your hand is pointing right toward your chest almost. If people have limitation of that movement in their wrist, there are ways to work around that. And the way to work around that most commonly is what they call a spiral fretboard. And so that's a fretboard that actually takes a turn as you get toward the headstock. And it's designed such that if your wrist doesn't move like everybody else's, the fretboard approximates your normal anatomical position at this point. It gets closer to the angle of your fingers if your wrist doesn't flex and extend very well. It's only about 18 degrees or so, but it then curves back and flattens back out as you come into a position where it's more natural to have your fingers pointing more up towards you. A spiral fretboard can also help with your strumming shoulder or your strumming wrist because it puts the strings just slightly more tipped towards you a little bit, as opposed to having to strum in a kind of an unnatural fashion straight down or down and away from you, depending on how you hold the guitar. If you're playing guitar, the guitar naturally is kind of, the strings are leaning slightly this way, and a spiral fretboard again can bring those strings into a little better position for someone who has wrist or shoulder injury on their picking strumming hand. You know, this is only one hand. We've got other things to look at on this hand later in the process. Another thing that can happen with wrists or forearms is rotation, this function. I've got pretty good function this way, but I've dealt with a guy who had almost no rotational function whatsoever. There are designs that you can do that can help with that rotation, and one of those is a multi-scale fretboard or fan frets, where the frets angle slightly that way down at this end of the guitar and this way up at this end of the guitar. And I apologize, I don't have a fan fret guitar here to show you, but I'm sure you've all seen one somewhere or another, or you can look them up. And so if you don't have good rotational ability with your forearm, you're working with frets that are angled in that direction. As you move to center, they're more straight. As you move up this way, you can see how my hand naturally points diagonally up across the fretboard, and as you move this direction, so do the frets. That can help with limitations in rotation. Other things that can happen are if you have pincer problems, you don't have a whole lot of strength, pinching strength, then you may want an asymmetrical neck or even a neck with a more geometric shape so that it reduces the amount of pincer strength you need to finger on the fretboard. And so that might be one reason for an asymmetrical neck. This particular guitar, you wouldn't be able to see it probably. This guitar is made for someone who may have some grip issues. There are other reasons why people play them, but this guitar is much thinner on this side than it is on this side. So there's a better platform here to grip with your thumb when you're playing this guitar. And it's really hard to see. I apologize for that. It's very subtle, but other reasons include the preferences that some players have. SRV played an asymmetrical neck. This is actually a reverse asymmetrical. Most asymmetrical necks are thinner on the treble side of the guitar, thicker on the bass side of the guitar. This is just the opposite of that. This is thinner on the bass side of the guitar, thicker on the treble side. And it's about grip and pincer. That takes care of some of the basic motions and limitations in your fretting hand. Flexion, extension, rotation, and pincer, gripping with your fingers, that sort of thing. So surprisingly enough, about 50% of the painful playing issues that people have are the strumming shoulder. And you can see what that's from. It's from years of strumming on a guitar, picking, trying to hold a motion at your shoulder for fine dexterity when that's not necessarily the best technique to use. Things you can do for that: you can dish out the body of the guitar, or actually put a very pronounced cutout here so that that arm lays and nestles into a space there and not so much of it ends up being shoulder. Knowing that 50% of painful playing issues are strumming side shoulder, I will design a guitar for someone that has a cradle built into it here where their arm goes. It's very painful to try to hold your arm steady from the shoulder. It's much easier to lay your forearm on the guitar and have that be your anchor point, and work from there to get your dexterity with this hand. So remember, even though my handle is Dr. B, I am not a doctor, I'm a nurse. I work with an orthopedic surgeon and a couple of occupational therapists, and So I discuss injuries with them. We talk about the nature of where people have pain and how we can build a guitar that better addresses that sort of thing. There have to be occupational therapists out there who play guitar, orthopedic surgeons who play guitar. Actually, the orthopedic surgeon who fixed my finger and my wrist were both guitar players, and that probably helped me in the long run because they knew what relative positions I needed to be able to play well. I would love to hear from those people. I'd love to hear your comments about my very broad overview of injuries and some of the things you can do to help address them. Please write in and let me know what you're thinking. So again, this is Dr. Bees. We've just been having some discussion about some of the limitations and injuries that may occur, the fact that both hands do different functions on the guitar. Love to hear your comments. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you in future videos.